without further ado, we're gonna jump right to it. We have Emily and Essence, and we're gonna interview them separately this morning, and then maybe at the end bring them both up together. I'll get to that point. Dr. Emily and Dr. Essence. So will you please, because this is nerve-wracking for everybody who gets up here, even though they're great, will you please stay to your feet and give Essence a hand as she comes? Right? This is what I see every day. I mean, on Sundays, and in my mind the rest of the week. Y'all, welcome Essence. So we're gonna touch briefly on your upbringing and kind of the early years of your life. So what did little Essence experience growing up? Oh, is that on? No, I got it. It's my fault. I sabotaged you.
Better?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So I was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm the first of my parents' 3 kids. So it was just me and them. And I knew about Jesus, I knew about church, I knew about being a Christian before I even understood what it was like to be a girl, or what skin color meant, or what the way that my brain worked, or anything. Like, that was the very first thing that my parents instilled, was that, like, I knew Jesus and Jesus loved me. And we were always in church, no matter which family member I was with, we were always going. And so I grew up, and initially we were going to like a Baptist church. And so I was one of the very few, if not the only one, that was biracial. My mom was like the only white person in the church. And so we ended up leaving, and I don't know if it was specifically due to that, but we ended up kind of looking for other churches that reflected our family. And we moved into a church that was in the conservative Mennonite conference. So we completely went like to the way other side. And my dad, I remember we went the first time and it was a potluck. And my dad was like, oh, we can do this. So we ended up going and being there for a while. And that was kind of the church that I stayed in until I went off to college.
So when you talk about like being the only biracial person or that sort of stuff, as a child, what are some of the thoughts that are going through your head?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's always been very apparent to me that I'm different. Like, I've always felt like I didn't fit wherever I was. So there was often, like, it'd be a room full of everybody's black except for me, or everybody's all white except for me. And so it was always, like, racially, I felt different. I also have ADHD, and so being neurodivergent, the way I saw the world was, like, so different from the way that other people saw the world. And so I think I've never really felt like I was represented in the rooms that I was in. So it's always been kind of like that on multiple fronts.
And did religion help with that, or did it kind of hurt that perspective? Are we too far back and that's why you're lighting us up more? Okay, we're gonna move forward. I had a feeling. I need to be lit up really well, or it's a disaster online. There you go. Sweet. All right, we're gonna move this here because we're gonna get this up here. There you go. Is that better?
What you asked.
Gentlemen, how do I look? Steven, do I look good on camera? Is it okay? Give me a thumbs up, Steven, if I look good. All right, thank you.
I don't remember the question.
It was a good one.
Yeah, okay.
It was a good one. How did religion play a role in kind of when you started in your mind going, I don't feel like I fit in? Did religion help that? Like, was it a salve, or did it exacerbate it? How did it play out?
Yeah, I would say maybe both. I always really liked the characteristics about Jesus, that he like loved everybody and he saw people for who they were. So I've always connected with Jesus. Church, I wouldn't say like celebrated my differences. I think if anything, it was more highlighting that maybe I wasn't the ideal like Christian that people were talking about. I had a lot of questions. I've always had a lot of questions. And I was like, that doesn't make sense, which made me kind of a troublemaker in Sunday school of like, well, that's just the story. Like, just go with it. And I'm like, no, that doesn't, I have questions that I need answered. So I think just the way that I saw the world, I think that a lot of my friends growing up were homeschooled, and I was like the public schooler. And so that was always something where they were like, well, all of us go to Christian schools or homeschools, and that makes us a good Christian. And maybe if you want to like be a good example to your friends in the public school system, you need to be more like us. So I feel like religion really kind of highlighted all the reasons that people didn't feel like I belonged in church, not brought me into church.
So the lack of clear inclusivity, is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And as someone who didn't feel included, how did that feel to you? And the reason I'm asking this is because there are people here who know exactly what you're talking about, and there are people here that are like, what? Because for some of us, we walk into almost any church in America, and we blend right in, and there's no issues or problems, and there's no like people going like this. But when you explain what that feels like when you've experienced that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting because when you are, especially in an interracial family, I think when you're like, your family is monoracial, it's a little bit different. But if you even look on like advertising materials, I would never see my family represented. I would never see me. So like even looking on like a church, I don't know, when we watch, not like VeggieTales, but those children's church videos, like there were never people that looked like me. And so I already had this like belief that something was wrong with me, or like I had a lot of work to do to become the person that God would be happy with. Like I was like, yeah, he's gonna do something, but I'm not the person I'm supposed to be yet. But it never happened. Like there was never a moment that I was like, oh, okay, like I'm wanted, or I'm finished, or I'm like the right version. It was just kind of the opposite kept happening. So when I started to support, like when I went to college and I started to support like the queer community, and I started to support, or like my political views started to change, there was a lot of backlash from my home church that was like contacting my parents, saying that they were concerned about my salvation, that were like going outside of those conversations to tell me that I was reading the Bible wrong, or I don't understand how the church works, or I'm supposed to be like this great example for people that want to know Christ, and like with my example, they're not going to want to do that. Like the messaging was clear that like I was not good. And the way that I was going, as I was continuing to find myself, that was making me more not fit, not the other way around.
And you have a folder on your phone, right? What does this folder have in it?
Okay, so I told you guys I've always kind of been like troublemaker-y. And I think it's fine when people are like, oh, she always asks questions. Like, okay. But when I moved into college, I don't know what it was about turning 18, my dad was a pastor at the church that I spent most of my time in. He was like on the elder board, so our family was like in everything. And I don't know, there's something about when your family is in leadership that the congregation feels like they have more of maybe an input on how your family is running than
What?
if you're just I know, you get it. Yeah, like, so people would be like, oh, Essence posted this, like, what is that about? But rather than going to my parents like they did when I grew up, who they were seeing every week, sometimes they were just coming directly to me and saying like, I'm worried about your salvation, or what you're doing is not right, or you're going to hell, or you're not a good example. And like, that takes a toll on, I'm in graduate school at this point trying to figure out how I can be a good person and help other people find themselves. And I'm getting messaging from the community that has always been like my people telling me that like, it's not looking good. So I had to find some way to kind of create distance. So I have a folder on my phone that's entitled, or like an album that's called Love Is Not, with all the screenshots of things that people have said to me like over the years. So that I was like, okay, I'll just take a screenshot, I'll put it in the folder, and I've dealt with it so that I would stop internalizing them.
Now, we hear this a lot in Storytellers Sundays. We hear this a lot from people in this congregation, just how many church-attending people, and I use those words specifically, because I don't know if you're a Jesus follower when you're that mean to somebody you barely know, and you go out of your way to hunt down their direct message and type a message of hate and condemnation, it's real. Like, I'm not making this up. Like, the hate coming out of the mouths or the typing of people who attend church every Sunday is unreal.
Well, I think it's different too. Like, these are not people that I didn't know. These are like my friends' parents, the people I had sleepovers at their houses, that had like picked me up because of things. They brought food when my mom was pregnant. Like, I don't think I have any ever since I came out. That was like the last straw for everyone. So I've been like completely ostracized from my home church. There's not anybody really maybe one couple I can think of that still even talk to my parents.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You told me something when we were talking about when you and Emily were just friends and you were sitting on the couch, watching TV or whatever, just hanging out, and you had this urge to talk. What did that look like?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of context. I did not grow up like in the LGBTQ community. Like, that wasn't a part of my identity. Even up until meeting Emily, I was like straight. I was like, okay, I'm gonna marry a man, like all is well. And that was, see, that makes me look bad.
Aaron disagrees with that all is well statement. I want to throw that out there right now.
It was one thing that I didn't have to worry about being wrong with me up until a certain point. But it was like every single time I would tell people stuff about me, it would be like this weird, anxious, compulsive, like telling on myself, that I like felt like I needed to give people disclaimers of like who I was or what they were getting into, because I always felt like a lot to people. So I would
Has
give
anyone ever
disclaimers.
experienced that?
That's helpful, thanks.
Yeah.
And so I went on this like soul searching journey or whatever of setting boundaries. So I like told myself I'm not telling people stuff anymore until I really get to know them. Like, I'm keeping it close because I don't want to get hurt anymore. And I'm hanging out with Emily, and it's kind of funny. Are you okay with me telling the context? Okay. So we both just were spending Valentine's Day together. We're like, you know what? We're just gonna hang out. We're friends. We're like new friends at this point too. And so Emily like got Cheesecake Factory. I was like, wow, I love you. It was a good hangout. And I'm sitting there. We're like doing like, what new friends do. You're just talking about like the surface level things. And all of a sudden, like, my chest was so heavy, and I was like, I need to tell her my life story. And I was like, no, like, we're setting boundaries. Like, I cannot do this. So I'm having this like internal fight. She's talking, and I'm like, should I tell her my life story or not? And I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. And so I was like, I don't know why, but I just feel like I need to tell you something. And she was like, okay. So we like turn, and I sit there, and I told her, I literally feel like from birth to the day that we were at, I told her everything. She didn't interrupt me. She didn't like ask any questions. She didn't challenge me. She didn't really have anything to say. She just listened. And then I was like, that's the story. And she was like, I'm sorry, and gave me a hug. And it was like everything that I had grown up believing that like the church was supposed to be happened in that moment.
Can we just like dive a little bit deeper into that concept of what you expected the community that was the church to be, and how you were let down by that, but then in this moment, like, explain that to me a little bit more.
So I think it's important, like, I'm not really focusing on like the queer part of my identity, but I do think it's important that Emily was the first friend I ever had that was like close enough to me that I felt like I could ask questions. And I was like, okay, how did you know that you were a lesbian? Or what does this mean? Or, I mean, poor Emily was getting voice memos in the middle of the night, like, wait, what about this? And she answered every question. And as a person that's always been told, like, that's a stupid question, or just go with it, or why are you making this such a big deal? That was always something that really connected me with her, is I ask some wild questions, and she always answers them, or she would find an answer, or she would find something. And I think that was part of what made it feel safe to tell her things, was because she had never called me stupid. She never made me feel like I was too much. She never made me feel like I was like broken or any of those things that I had always been taught, or like the messaging I was receiving. And so it was such a risk, because I was like dedicated to not telling my story to people anymore. But the fact that she just listened and accepted me for what I was, and like, it didn't change anything. We kept hanging out. I didn't have to worry about like losing my friend, or that she was gonna be like, oh, if that's the case, if you've been through that, or you've tried that, or you've said that, or believed that, like, never mind. There were no conditions, and there was nothing that I said. And there was a lot that she could have been like, oh, I don't know. If you know us, Emily is really the well-behaved one of the two. And there was none of that. And I felt like, we always were taught that the church was like a hospital for the sick, and you're supposed to go and get better, but like, that's a lie. Like, that was a lie. It was never safe to be sick. And
So I want you to, for a moment, put on your Dr. Essence hat for just a sec here. What would be your advice to us as a church community when it comes to dealing with people telling their stories, number one, and people asking questions even if they're wild?
I think you've set a really good, like, I always knew that was something that needed to be done, but I didn't know what it would look like. There were no models. That's why coming here was so crazy for us, because we're like, wait, this is it. And I think that as a church, like, even just being open about the fact that like everybody has a different journey and everybody's identity is different, and we're not all supposed to look like this mold, has been like so helpful for me to start letting that version of me back in. Because it almost felt like my faith was like, I was always worried that like, is this going to be the thing that makes it where I can't be a Christian anymore, or that I can't talk to God anymore? And I was done with church. When I met Emily, like, I had been done in 2020 after we had like the whole election in 2016, and that was when church like really traumatized me. And then when everything happened with like George Floyd's murder and the aftermath of that, I was like, I'm good, I'm out. And I remember when I started to kind of fall for Emily, I was like, oh, if I do this, this is like my last straw that's gonna like let me be in church. If I decide that like we're gonna be together, then like I don't get to have access to God anymore, because that's what I've been taught. And that was like those questions and those conversations that we would have about faith and about our beliefs about the world and everything was ultimately the thing that brought me back to church, not the other way around. And so I think creating space for people to not feel shame and to ask questions and to be believed is like so healing.
It's great. Can we just dive into the George Floyd thing for a moment? Because that was something that struck us as a congregation, and I know myself personally, in a different way. What about the church's response, nationally, turned you off so much from the idea of what the church was doing?
I don't know if I could even speak to like the big church as much as I could to like just like what was in front of me. I remember my family was on vacation, maybe like a week after or days after that happened, and we were like posting things, because obviously my dad's a black man, like that, half of my family's black, we're all black, we're not boys, and so that is a little protective, but like this was close to home for my family. And we were posting things and we were engaging in conversations, and then the people, like, I don't know, to me it was a no-brainer on like how we felt about the situation, but then I started to see things that I was like, you really believe that? Or like, you thought that was okay? And so we started to open up as a family a little bit more about our experiences, because we were like the only family of color. And the amount of people that were like picking apart whether or not racism is a thing, or whether or not the experiences that our family had had were in fact racism, or people like making me justify, because I had a doctorate or I was working towards a doctorate, why, like I was an example of why privilege wasn't real. And like, it was just like a huge jumbled mess of like, how can you love me and believe these things like confidently? And like, what part of love is you like picking apart whether or not I'm hurt, or whether or not this has happened to me, or whether or not like we are at risk for this? Like, I didn't understand it. And I think that was what, like one of those things of like, people were asking me to like put all of our, as a family, our racial trauma on display to like prove that they should care. And I didn't want to do that. I mean, I did. I was like fighting that fight for a long time before I was like, this is exhausting. That's the first time I developed depression. I started to have like very significant anxiety, which I had never had. I was having panic attacks when different things would happen on the news, because I just knew that this was going to mean something for me. I'm in my like first year of grad school trying to learn things, into like leaving and moving to Florida, all of that period of time where I'm trying to do the thing that I've been working my whole life for. There's like these voices at home that are telling me that like, yeah, I suck. Yeah, I'm making the world a worse place. Jesus would not be happy with me. They're worried about my soul. Like, and it just felt so backwards of like, I feel so connected to my values and you're telling me that I'm so far away from God. Well then, I don't know, like I guess me and God have to part, because like this is not it. And it wasn't until we walked into Harvest that I was like, maybe both can work.
So obviously you got your PhD. What was the driving force behind that? Like, why did you ultimately want to do the work and get the education and put in all of the effort and time into doing what you're doing today?
My dad. My dad's a psychologist. We had the same first day of school. So when I started kindergarten, he started his PhD program. And by the time I was like in middle school, where you really start to think about what you want to do, he was done and he was doing it. And I was like, that's cool. Like, I like what you're doing and I like what changes you get to make. And so the path to becoming a psychologist was pretty clear for me throughout. But I think the thing that wasn't as clear has been like what I'm actually doing versus what I thought I was going to be doing. I thought I was going to work with like preschoolers. I don't like preschoolers. I like them like not as clients, but I'm being honest. And yeah. And what I ended up doing is I just started to be open about who I am. And I think Emily gave me a lot of support in that of like, no, people, you should talk about that. Like, yeah, that is safe to share. That will help people. She helped me to feel confident in my story. And then I just started telling it, not even all of it, just like glimpses. And I would update my little like profiles to find clients with just a little bit more information or a little bit more honest. And now I have so many clients that are queer, neurodivergent, people of color that are trying to figure out where they fit in the world. And it's just like the craziest God moment of each day I get to help people that are either where I'm at or where I've been to find out who they are and what that means for them. I never would have thought that that would have been the work that I was doing, but it is so fulfilling.
Amazing. We're going to bring you back up in a little bit because I have some more questions for you, but I'm going to have you tag Emily in. Is that cool? Yeah. Y'all welcome Emily.
She's a tough act to follow.
I know, but you're going to do awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want the real you.
I can do that.
So you grew up Catholic, right?
I did.
So a little bit of a different experience.
Very different. People like stiffen up when I say that.
Any people grew up Catholic in the room?
Okay.
There you go.
My people.
There you go. Jill, we're still trying to, tweak that.
I grew up here. Not many people are from like here and stay here, but I grew up here. I was in the Catholic Church my whole life. I watched my dad, he grew up Lutheran and converted to Catholicism when I was younger. And there are elements of that I really connected with. I loved like the reverence of the church and just the care that is taken when talking about the story of Jesus and everything like that. But my whole life there was elements of me that didn't fit into what the church said were the values that a good Catholic should have. And so I spent a lot of my time, especially like middle school, high school, trying to reconcile those differences and find a way for me to be me in that environment, but also still be a good Catholic. And I was like an altar server as a kid, and I remember one of like the very first times that stuck out the most to me, and that difference was the bishop was coming to our church. And I was like one of the altar servers that was like there every weekend. I was kind of like at the top of like the ranking, I guess. And I was told that I had to sit off the altar to the side because a woman couldn't touch any of the bishop's vestments. And so I like had a reaction to that. And I was like, this is an injustice. Like, that's not okay. Like, why is it there? And I was basically like given the message that like, you just gotta suck it up. Like, we know that's what it is, but like, it is what it is, and that's the answer you're gonna get. And so that started like my questioning process. And I was like, well, why does it have to be that way? In the same way, Essence is a system disruptor. I had some of those questions, but like she said, I'm more well-behaved, so I just kind of sucked it up and dealt with it. But
we thought about adopting that rule around here, that no woman touches the vestments, but I don't know what vestments are, so we took it out.
it just makes you look fancier. But then I had like friends come out in high school, and I hadn't gotten quite in touch with like my sexuality yet, and it was there, but I was like pushing it to the back because that was one of the things in Catholicism. It was just never going to be okay. And I had friends come out, and my parents were very supportive of my friends, and I was like, okay, there could be some wiggle room in there. And so it kind of became like the lesson, which was that's the belief of the church, and you can be different, but don't be too outspoken about it. You can have your views, but when you come into the church, like that's what it is.
So talk about the system disruptor thing, because you guys have mentioned this a couple times. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so a lot of our training, especially in the last 2 years of our training, we're very much focused in Palm Beach County on that you don't act and interact in isolation, that you are a bigger part of your family, of your community, and in that, the messaging and the environment and all those is not just about you. It's about so many more things. And so if you can change one part of you, that's great, but if you go back into the same environment, the same behaviors are going to pick up again because the resistance makes it much easier to just go with what's comfortable. And so being able to zoom out and see the bigger picture of a system, which is how are all these things interacting? What's the connection? What is the cause and effect? You can then change the bigger system rather than changing one person in that system.
Amazing. I think I'm a system disruptor.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Oh, man. So what was your faith journey kind of post-Catholic church? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so I went like through all high school, and then when I left high school, graduated high school, I went to West Virginia University, and that's where I went to. There's always one.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense, all right?
I went there for undergrad, and then I went there for grad school. And so in there, I went to a church, and it was much more conservative than the Catholic church I grew up in, and that didn't feel like a great fit. And so I went church shopping. I think there was like 5 Catholic churches in Morgantown. I went to every single one of them. And on the last one that I went to, I finally found what felt like a good fit. There were openly queer couples in the church. They weren't sitting in the back, they were sitting up front. The Monsignor went up and said hi to them. Every church, it was the closest I could have ever seen the LGBTQ plus community integrating into the Catholic Church. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, it started to feel like me. I started like my coming out process. This was all happening during COVID. But then I graduated and I left Morgantown. And I was like, I just found something that felt comfortable. I felt something that like fit what I wanted the church to look like, and now I have to leave again. So that was really frustrating. And I ended up in West Palm Beach, and I went to probably like 3 Catholic churches in West Palm Beach. And at that time, I was really just trying to think, like, how could I be here, possibly bring a partner into this? Like, is it too small? Is it too big? Would I be noticed? All those kinds of things. And so I never quite found the right fit. And that's when Essence and I started to become friends. And at that point, I had stopped going to church, except when I went home to visit my parents.
Wow. How long did you guys know each other before you became more than friends?
6 months, about 6 months, yeah.
So, 6 months. Who convinced who?
Yeah, it was one of those things where like we weren't really trying to do anything. I was at the end of a relationship with someone else at that time, and it was long distance, and it was not healthy at all. And so Essence was really that person who helped me process that, like, the person that I was with was taking more from me than they were pouring into me. And she just really helped me through that process and like finding my voice, because through that and through a lot of like other things, I really struggled to like speak my story, and that's something Essence has been so helpful with, is like telling me that my voice matters and that like I can be more than just like level. Is in 2012, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she's good now, so. But it was like a really scary time, and I had to like adopt this level of, I think, neutrality to just be okay. And that just kind of maintained after that. And I never had anyone else like encourage me to go past that. And so the struggles in my identity and my like being able to be okay in like a religious environment, it was like ambiguity and just like neutrality were okay. But she was the first person who told me that like I deserved more than just like neutrality. And so that took a minute to be okay with that.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, one of the things that we talked about that just immediately struck me, because it's something that we see a lot, is some of the field of work that you're doing now. Can you describe, and we'll start with, if you can, the work you're doing with parents who have adult or children who are queer, and they're learning to understand that. So tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so they kind of found me. It was an unexpected blessing. But I do a lot of work with an adult population, mostly parents of kids who are trans or transitioning or coming out, or who have adult children who are transitioning and need a space to have a process without hurting their kids. And so they come to me, and I help them learn the language and do a lot of psychoeducation on, you know, the coming out process and what it means to support and affirm and love somebody who is transitioning. But allow them to like be messy with me, so you don't have to do it in front of your family member. Because the way I always explain it to them is like, you're joining a race in progress. Like, your kid is hours ahead of you in this marathon. And so it's okay for you to be behind, but eventually you need to finish that race too. And so it takes a space to be okay, to not know everything, and to know that you can come talk to me and not hurt someone else in the process by like being a bit of a mess.
So we have some parents. Yes, that's great. I told you they're smart, right? Amazing. We have parents that will watch this that are kind of, we have people that watch this that are kind of on the fringe and wanting to learn more, but a lot of their upbringing is dragging them back the other way.
Yeah.
And their fear and what kind of advice do you give people that are kind of in that in-between, that want to love their child well, but are really struggling, whether religiously, culturally, whatever it is?
Yeah, I think fear is okay. I think you've talked about this in one of your sermons, is like fear is like evolutionarily, like it exists for a reason. And there's a big difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. And that's often where fear gets the best of us, is when we take a perceived threat and try and make it a real threat. And so when you take the moment to like take your kid out of the process and let you have a process, that frees you up so much more to then be available to somebody else. But like, if you don't have a good foundation to fall back on, you can't support anything else. So like, your foundation has to be shored up. You have to take the time to be the best version of you so that you can show up for anybody else.
We're gonna run out of time, so I wanna bring Essence back up. Essence, you wanna come up here? We'll grab this microphone. I think looks like KK's mic, Michael. Or no? Yours is over here? That's Corey's. Yeah, Corey, that's Corey's. It's anointed, don't worry. No, there's no turning it on, it's ready to rock. And you'll sound better than us, because that's a better mic than these two, okay? Just so you know.
Should have cleared my throat.
Yes. So these two are engaged.
Woo!
And they asked me to perform the ceremony.
Woo!
There was less applause for that one, but that's okay.
Well, we're happy about it.
And I am going to make it about them and not me, okay? For any of you that are wondering. The fact that so many of you shook your heads when I said that is scary. We need to do some rebranding around here. Okay. So you all have a business together. Tell us about customized behavioral healthcare, right? Did I get that right?
Nailed it.
Customizedbehavioralhealthcare.com. So tell us some of the things you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we're actually like kind of in business with my whole family. It's been really cool. So my dad founded the practice in 2008, and it was always part of the plan that I was going to go and work with him. And then I met Emily, and I had to tell my parents, I think I'm gay. Also, I'm not moving back to Ohio. And at first that was rough, and they changed very quickly after they met Emily. And so we've got the opportunity to not just personally like really be there in our community, but also professionally. My dad is like so supportive of us too, and like all of the things that make our hearts like beat faster. And so, and your mom's been amazing in connecting us with the Sarasota community. So we do individual, family, couples, group therapy, all of those things. But one of the things we got from Palm Beach County of being systems disruptors is to do those things on a little bit of a larger level, because we can help people one-to-one. And that's great, but in a week, you only have so many hours. And that's been something that we share in looking at systems and looking at how can we do more with the same amount of time. And Emily is our director of community engagement, and she's like the brains behind that operation, so I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're really focusing on is there's so many organizations in Sarasota who are already doing a great job. It doesn't make sense for us to come in and try and like do something different or compete with them, so we'd rather work with them. So we're working on doing trainings for diversity, equity, inclusivity,
Belonging.
all those kind of DEI objectives, and really just trying to go into organizations who want more support or want to learn or don't have the training that they think they should have and fill in those gaps. So rather than going in and saying everybody has to come to us, we've kind of come to the conclusion that we want the community to be our office. So go where we're needed instead of trying to force people to come to us. And so the goal is to just make Sarasota and beyond, quite honestly, a better place with people who can take that knowledge. And if we can teach 10 people who then can go reach 100 people, that's so much better than we could do in just a week.
Yeah. So you guys are venturing out into consulting and speaking and all sorts of stuff. And we're going to run out of time, like I said. So I want to say this because I want to say it publicly. I said it privately. I'm going to keep it a little shorter than what I said privately. But for what it's worth, I feel when I'm around these two, God. And I'm crying. What an idiot. Okay.
You're allowed to have emotions.
I don't need your psycho BS right now, okay? Just kidding. I'll give you space. All right. When I'm around the two of you, I feel God. And it's so obviously opposite of the messaging of the church. But if you are here and you're sensing how special these two are, how special their lives are individually and also together, let that register with your heart and spirit that not only does God love the two of you and is rooting for both of you, but he's rooting for you together too. I can 100% declare that God is with the two of you because I sense it when I'm around you. And I want to say this, and I don't like launch out into like anything that can be perceived as prophetic much anymore. But I will say that I feel such a sense of God's favor on your lives. And what I told the two of them, I said, you both, listen to me, I know this is hard to hear, you both are stars. And your stars are rising and they're shining bright, and it's just the beginning for your lives. I feel privileged to just be able to sit back and watch what is going to happen with your life. And although I believe there is divine favor on your life, I also believe that your hard work and determination and fighting through so much crap over the years is going to pay off for your lives. You really mean a lot to this community. You really do.
Thank
Sincerely.
you. Thank you.
So just indulge us for a moment about what Harvest has meant to the two of you. If you can kind of explain that, because I want the people here to know what this is for your lives.
The first time that we walked into Harvest, we had seen it. You had found a TikTok of KK and Kayla, and she sent it to me, and she's like, "Look at this," and I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." And we were like, moved on, and then we somehow realized where it was, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, we should go." So I think it was like our first or second Sunday living in Sarasota when we came, and I mean the whole time we're sitting there because we have tried some churches, and I'm like I was waiting for something to happen. Like, okay, let's see. And the first thing that was said was about how clarity is kindness and who was welcome. And I looked at Emily and I was like, we can actually enjoy the service now because we don't have to worry if they're going to say something about us not belonging. And I think that it was so special to both of us. We grew up in church. Our parents go to church together. That was the model that we saw. And I don't think either one of us was ready to give up on that, but we did not know how it was going to look. And I think that has been so helpful for us figuring out where we wanted to end up ultimately, because it wasn't here. We were like, we're going to leave. This is like a pit stop. And Harvest has really made us, I think it was the second time we went to church, we were like, maybe we could stay here. And we stopped planning to leave. And we're actually able to have a community, which has been so special. I sobbed the whole car ride home after the first. I just cried. Emily was like, "It's okay," and I'm like, "You don't understand. I never thought. I've always been a problem, and I don't think I'm a problem here." And even when we walked back to Dan's office this morning, I was like, "Wow, it's nice. We're not in trouble. We're just we're just talking."
If anyone felt in trouble, it's me. All right.
Yeah. So it hasn't felt like a fight or flight situation every Sunday anymore, which is, I mean, so much. I don't even know how to put it into words.
Yeah, I think for me, my journey has always been like, I can blend, like I can hide parts of my identity. I've never struggled the way Essence did in the church environment because like if I needed to, like I could pass. And so we went into so many churches, and there's one in particular in West Palm that every Sunday we left, and in the car ride we always had a conversation of, it was so great, they could have crossed the line but they didn't, and they towed the line so well, and like it was just so nice that like they didn't say the quiet part out loud, and then it fell off. Like one Sunday we missed, and then after that there wasn't that much of a need to like go back. There wasn't a calling to go back. And it's so nice that after Sundays now, we just talk about the message and what it meant to us and how it connected with us, instead of talking about like, thank God he didn't say something that he could have said. And that's just like, it's so nice not to, like you said, be in fight or flight anymore or wait for like the other shoe to drop. Like we're truly just like able to listen to the message now and like see how it connects with us, instead of trying to find the one thing that like could have been good in it.
That's amazing. Come on, Harvest. That's you guys. Thank you. Well, you guys, this has been we could do this for another hour, but it's been amazing. Thank you for being so authentic. Thank you for sharing your stories, and thank you for being a part of this community. We are so much better because you're both here. Amen, church?